This morning I'd like to read to you from one of Mark Nepo's books, The Endless Practice. You may know Mark Nepo. He's best known for his day book called The Book of Awakening. But this is a later book of his, and he talks about becoming who you were born to be, and he lays out a number of practices that we can do in our day-to-day life to become who we were born to be, and that's why it's called the endless practice. You don't just get it once and then you're done. And so I'm going to read to you an introduction to one of those practices. This is the practice of courage. The practice of courage is doing small things with love. This was Mother Teresa's anthem. We begin to dismantle what is overwhelming by beginning the journey of involvement one hand at a time, one kindness at a time, one utterance of truth at a time. From the outside, things that require courage seem impossible. But once we begin, we're no longer on the outside. This lets us see more. This lets us feel the current of the situation we have to cross. Any small act of love shows us the next step to be taken. So it's imperative to stop rehearsing the perfect starting point and just begin. We can practice doing small things with love when we're not afraid, so it will be available to us when we are afraid. You can do this by making dinner for your dog, or getting coffee for your loved one, or holding the door for an elder who's taking way too long to cross the parking lot in the rain. This world is our practicing ground. The word authentic comes from the Greek authentes, which means bearing the mark of the hands. Doing small things with love is how we care for each other one hand at a time. Doing small things with love releases our courage. And each small act we're led to leads to more. Doing small things with love is the atom of bravery. I tell myself when afraid, to be courageous, I don't need to become my best self. I just need to open who I already am, and courage will fill me.
Getting brighter as I wake up to the truth. Every day I'm feeling so much lighter as the world seems fresh and new. Oh, what I taught in the way that I thought stopped serving me long ago. Now I'm learning to trust in the God of all of us. Each day I start anew, and so I'm walking away from the thinking that held me for so long. Today is the day I walk away. I'm walking away from the path that led me to confusion. Today is the day I walk away. I'm walking away from the thinking that held me for so long. Today is the day I walk away. I'm walking away from the path that held me to confusion. Today is the day I walk away. Every day I walk away. Every morning brings a new beginning. By a grace, another day to be. I awaken to the sun upon me shining, lighting the way for me to see. Oh, the things I sought in the way that I thought stopped serving me long ago. Now I'm learning to trust the God in all of us. Today I'll walk away, 'cause I'm walking away from the less thans that held me for so long. Today is the day I walk away. I'm walking away from the path that led me to confusion. Today is the day I walk away. Oh, I'm walking away from the thinking that had me for so long. Today is the day I walk away. I'm walking away from the path that led me to confusion. Today is the day I walk away. Every day I walk away. Today is the day I walk away.
We are so blessed every Sunday to have that, and what a beautiful walking away from those things that no longer serve us. Would you give them your love and appreciation? Beautiful. Beautiful. Today we begin a November exploration that leads us up, to November. How many of you just love the fall? I love the fall, and I love winter until January 1st, and then it's about time for it to go on out of town, in my opinion, but hey. But this time of year, I just love everything changing colors. It reminds us that the nature of nature is change, amen? And the nature of nature is to release its colors, its essence, its fruit, its potential, and then to go back in and to regroup and to be reborn for our next way of expressing. And the thing about it in our lives, we don't sometimes see it as clearly as we do in nature, and that's why these seasons remind us that it happens every day. That every day we're being reborn, that something's dying, something's budding, something's coming to life, something has run its course. And so this month we really are going to look at that through sort of different concepts. And so today, the title of today's talk is Tipping Point Consciousness and 7 Seconds. Tipping Point Consciousness and the Power of 7 Seconds. Now, this concept about a tipping point, and especially tipping point consciousness, is You know, at all times and in all ways, we are making a difference. Jesus said it this way when he talked to his disciples and anybody that would listen. He talked about that you're the light of the world. Not you can be, you should be, but that you are. Your presence is a light. He said you're the salt of the earth. Not you could be or you should be, but you are the salt. Anybody ever cooked anything and forgot to put the salt in? I'll never forget the first time I made mashed potatoes. I was so excited to surprise my mom until I tasted them. They're like, yuck. And I totally forgot to put any salt. And it doesn't take a lot, but what salt does is it brings the flavor up, and that we're like light and we're like salt. And what they do is they are an influence. They influence things. And so today we want to talk about tipping point consciousness, how you are always being an influence, and your influence is either of influence, whether it's a thought that is a wave, that is a vibration, that there is no such thing as null and void. Everything has an impact, amen? Every thought, every idea, every action has some sort of ripple effect. And so we are always being an influence that is for the greater good, it's positive, it's a high vibration, or it is not. How many of you want to be a positive influence? How many of you are really aware that you're always being an influence of some kind or another? How many of you admit you got some room to improve? Don't nudge anybody and say that's for them. Just say no. She's talking. Keep it looking like this. Don't get in trouble. That we all, I'm speaking to me too, that we have much room to improve. And so today we're going to explore 4 questions, really, 4 things to take into consideration when we think about our influence. And that is, are you aware of who and what influences you? Number 2, who and what would you like to have influence you? Number 3, what kind of influence are you? And number 4, what kind of influence would you like to be? So as we look at that, I want to lay down a little bit of groundwork with this idea and the term tipping point. You're familiar with what a tipping point is, but there's a sort of a sociological idea behind it. It comes from, it's the title of a book. And in this book, there was an actual thing that happened that sort of sparked this study. It happened in 1994 with all things with shoes. How many of you have ever in your life owned a pair of Hush Puppy shoes? Go ahead and admit it and let the Lord love you. We all have probably owned them or bought them or know what they are. So if you don't know what they are, just Google them after service. You'll see. But these suede-looking, what's called Hush Puppy shoes, in 1994, they had pretty much ran their course, and the company only sold 30,000 pair that year, which was actually a very low number, and they were on the brink of discontinuing them. And something interesting, an interesting phenomenon happened in New York City in the East End and Soho. These group of kids happened to walk into this like closeout store, and they saw a bunch of these Hush Puppy shoes, so they all bought them. A whole pile of kids bought these shoes. 2 of the kids were sometimes would walk on a runway in fashion design shows, and so when they did, these 2 kids wore the Hush Puppies. The artist, it was his clothing line, liked them, so he went out and found a pair for himself, and he decided that for the next show, he would put everybody in Hush Puppies. That little thing that happened in New York City began to spread like wildfire. And from 1994, when they sold 30,000 pair, in 1995, the next year, they sold 430,000 pair. So now it had caught on and increased a little bit. It began to spread even further, and the next year, in 1996, they sold approximately 2 million pair, and it was selected as the fashion accessory of the year. And it was such a phenomenon that this shoe that was just about to go out, that because a few people paid attention to it, became influential. Do you realize influence is contagious? Whether it's positive or negative, influence is highly contagious. So why not let it be positive? And so they began to study that, and hence what was called the tipping point effect. That each and everything we do makes a difference, has an impact. We are influential. The question is, are we aware of it, and are we being intentional about it? About that same time, and based on that same study, a second thing happened. So they're talking about tipping point and how our actions can make it are influential, and how that influence can spread and literally change something huge. So again, around that same time, the second thing happened. A university professor, Tony Campolo, encouraged his college students. They were talking about influence, and he shared the hush puppy tipping point story, and he said, he challenged them, each and every one of you are a person of influence. And when you combine your capacity to be an influence, it's even greater. So he gave an assignment, come up with the most radical thing you could think of to really demonstrate your capacity to see your influence in work. And so the kids came up with a pretty good idea, and he said, yeah, let's go for it. What they did, they identified a company called Gulf and Western Company. This particular company that was based in the United States was doing a lot of their work in Haiti, and they were getting sugar out of Haiti. But the company, they weren't paying the workers very fairly. And so when the students found out about the company and what was going on, they said, let's take this on. Let's see if we can make a difference. And they decided that in order to make a difference, they'd need a voice. And so they said, well, what if we just bought one share of stock each, and the stock was very low. If they just bought one share of stock each, technically they became a stockholder. Technically they could go to the stockholders' meetings. So all of those students bought one share of stock each, and next annual meeting they all showed up with the professors en masse. And they weren't trying to shame the company. They were genuinely wanting to see, can we be a positive influence? Can we make a difference? And so they began to raise their hands one by one and ask about the conditions in Haiti. Are the people being educated? Do they have health care? Are you taking advantage of them? The company had never experienced anything like this because, most people, if you get an invitation to go to a shareholder thing, you just throw the paper in the trash can. So all these students, the owners of the company, the leaders weren't quite sure what to do. So they invited them to come in and enter into a conversation. Long story short, with the help of the students and with the students they brought in Mount Sinai Medical Center, bringing all of these people together. 18 months later, they approved and rolled out a socially responsive action plan for any business doing business in the Dominican Republic. Isn't that beautiful that their intention changed the whole course of how that company and other companies would do business? And the whole point was for those students to realize you are a person of influence. That's what Jesus meant when he said, you're the light. Light is influence. You're the salt of the earth. You are an influence. And so beginning to realize and to see it as a gift and a blessing, that's what we dig into today, and asking ourselves this question about, what it means to know yourself as an influence. So the first question we ask is, are you aware of who and what influences you? Are you aware of who and what influences you? How many people can think of somebody in your life that really made a positive influence on your life? How many of you can think of somebody that made a not so positive influence in your life? Yeah, we remember those things. So are you aware of who and what influences you? We're created with something called mirror reflectors. Little newborn babies, one of our main nursery workers just had a new baby, and so she was in the nursery today, and I was in looking at this little bundle newborn baby. And little newborn babies they have what they call the copycat syndrome. If you've ever held a newborn baby or a baby just a few days or weeks old, have you ever noticed that if you smile and giggle, they're likely to try to smile? If you frown and start crying, their little cheeks will start quivering. And as they get a little older, they really do that. They mirror back what they see. And if you don't believe that, have you ever said anything you didn't want your little one to say in public, and they did? they outed you. The kids will say those things, some things that you don't want them to say because they pick them up. So starting from a very young age, we are impressionable. We're influenced from so many things. So to be aware of what is influencing you. So often we mindlessly spend time on the internet or Facebook, and I'm not saying those things are bad because I do believe we should be informed, but do you ever walk away feeling like you've been slimed? Or just like, ugh. And then what do we do with it? What do we do with those feelings? So it's about bringing an awareness and asking yourself, what am I allowing to influence me? What am I really allowing to influence me? And then that leads to the second question of what would you like to influence you? One of my favorite things I loved to do, and as a kid, I remember in elementary school all these little weird science projects we did. And one of the things that totally fascinated me, I remember the first time I saw it, some child brought in a little vase full of daffodils, these yellow-colored flowers that come out every spring. And so as their project, they set the little cup of daffodils in the room, and then they squirted bright red dye into the water. And nothing happened. We went home, and then we came back the next day, and I thought somebody had switched them out because those yellow daffodils, what color were they? Bright red. If you've never tried it, you should try it. Whatever color dye you put in, they will pull it up, and within 24 hours, their colors are showing. And sometimes we forget that we're just like that. We take that stuff on. So what would you like to have influence you? I saw a cartoon this week about a woman who was taking a pair of eyeglasses back. She was in the store and she said, I want to return these eyeglasses I bought for my husband. And they said, well, what's wrong with them? She said, they're not working. And they said, well, why are they not working? She said, because my husband is still not seeing things the way I want him to see them. that sometimes we're trying to influence other people when really it's right here. We need to think about what kind of influence am I being, rather than trying to control that over other people. But who and what would you like to have influence you? President Roosevelt told a story that he said really made an impression on him. He said when he was new in office, he was interviewing some different people that wanted to be his aide or an intern. And one young man came in and sat down, and as always, he would bring a cup of coffee. He had a cup of coffee for both, and Roosevelt took the creamer and he poured a little into his coffee cup, and then he poured a little bit into his saucer. And as he was taking the saucer and bending over to put it on the floor, he noticed that young man did the same thing. He poured creamer in the coffee, but he also poured a little creamer in the saucer. And before he could say don't, Roosevelt set his on the floor for his cat. And you see, the other person was copying him without even knowing why. And Theodore Roosevelt talked about the fact that if I made that kind of impression on that man, that young man, who makes impressions on me that I don't even realize? What kind of things am I taking in and marinating in and allowing into my consciousness? What is making an impression on me, and who would I like to influence me? That's where prayer and meditation are so important. It's what the Buddhists call the beginner's mind. It's what David said, create in me a clean heart. It means let me become a blank, open slate. Let me be open and sit in this presence so that you can inform me. You can speak to me. I am that I am can reach me, and from the inside out, stir up within me the truth of my being. Let me marinate myself in that. In Philippians, it says beautifully, the translation is the Message. Summing it all up, friends, I'd say you'll do best by filling your minds and meditating on things that are true and noble, things that are both reputable and authentic and compelling and gracious, the best, not the worst, the beautiful, not the ugly, things to praise, not things to curse. Put into practice what you learned, what you heard and saw and realized. Do that, and God, who makes everything work together, will work you and will work this harmonious presence through you. To think on and to meditate on those things. I'm not suggesting that you ignore the facts at hand. I really think we need to be educated. We need to know what's going on. We need to pay attention. We need to be involved. But we can't get carried away by the facts and forget the truth of our being. Amen? It's about really marinating and letting this higher truth inside and outside. So we begin by knowing who is influencing us, what is influencing us, and who and what would influence us. And what are we allowing to tip us from a good space to a not so good space? It's said that years ago when doctors were learning their practice, they were taught that one way you determine and can pick up if a patient is depressed is how you feel when you've left them. How many times have you been in the presence of someone and when you left, you were just exhausted? And how many times have you been in the presence of someone when you left, you felt a little lighter and a little higher? And so then that leads us to the next question. When someone is in your presence, how are they leaving? You know, are they glad you came or are they glad you left? We have to always be real about it. And so that third one then is, what kind of influence am I? What kind of influence am I currently being? How many of you have at least one or two good, honest friends who, if you ask them, day in and day out, what kind of influence am I? How many of you have a good, honest friend that will lovingly tell you the truth? You need to keep that friend and be willing to ask. Like, we'll still be friends, but lovingly tell me, what kind of influence am I? And to ask yourself, because you know what goes on. You know the inner atmosphere. So what kind of influence are you? What am I spreading around? What kind of mood am I typically in? What's brewing inside of me? There's a story that comes out of Canada. A number of years ago, there was an Indian chief of a Canadian tribe. And the chief died, and one of his grandson was appointed as the new chief. This grandson really hadn't studied the ways and was a bit of a rebel, and was kind of surprised to be appointed as the new chief, but he put on the regalia and he assumed the role. So the first time some from the tribe came to him from council, they said, "Chief, we need to know, will this be a long, hard winter?" And the young guy just said, "Yes." He didn't know, but he said yes. And so they went out and they began chopping wood, chopping wood. The fall was looking pretty warm and pretty nice, and after several weeks they came back again and they said, "Chief, we just want to make sure, we know you're new. Are you absolutely sure? Is this going to be a long, hard winter?" And now his ego is in place and he says, "Yes, this is going to be a long, hard winter," I said. But after they left, this young chief knew he had no idea. So he disguised himself and he went into town to the local university. He found the professor of meteorology. And he said, "Can you tell me what the prediction is? What's the winter supposed to be like this year? Is it supposed to be a long, hard winter?" And the meteorologist said, "Yes, we believe so." And he said, "Oh, good." And he looked at him a little bit, and he said, "Well, how do you know? What do you look to? How do you know?" And he said, "Well, honestly, we don't really have a good source." He said, "What we have found, our greatest influence is actually the local Native Americans." And this year, they've been chopping more wood than ever. So we think it's going to be a really hard winter. Yeah. So the point is, you are being an influence, whether you know it or not. You're always being an influence. And so what kind of influence are you? Which leads to the fourth question. The final question is, what kind of influence would you like to be? You know, that's, if a college student fills out an application, one of the most common questions is, who was most influential in your life and why? What kind of influence do you want to make with your life? It's a question I don't believe we should ever stop asking, because as Laura read with her reading and as Kat with the song, you know, every day we can walk away from what no longer serves. Every day we can walk away from things that have held us back. Every day we can walk away from those influences that haven't been positive. And every day we get to choose and show up and to say, this day, what kind of influence do I want to be? If I'm adding to the consciousness of all being and my consciousness, which way am I tipping the scales? Will this action tip it in a positive, or will this action tip it in a negative? We never ever know. You may never know. Sometimes it may come back, but far more times than not, you're not going to know the full consequence of your actions. I heard Bishop Desmond Tutu in an interview one time, and something really struck me that he said. You know, Desmond Tutu was born, he grew up in South Africa in the time of apartheid. And today he's an Anglican minister. He was the Archbishop of Cape Town. He's a very influential being for working against apartheid and for human rights. He's known as a great presence. But in an interview that I heard, someone asked him, they said, Bishop Tutu, what influenced you? Was there a turning point in your life when you knew you would commit your life to the work that you've done? And he said, absolutely. He said, when I was 9 years old, growing up in South Africa in the time of apartheid, he said, I was walking down the street with my mother, and the law, the rule, the expectation was that if you were walking on a pathway, a walkway, and if a white and a black met each other, under the apartheid rules, the black had to step off the walkway, often meaning had to step in the gutter, had to step off, and had to let the white person pass. And they had to tip to them, a nod of respect. So Desmond Tutu said, growing up in that time, he said, one day my mother and I were on a walkway, and we looked up, and there was a tall white man in a suit coming to us. But before we could even step off, the white man stepped into the gutter and tipped his hat at us. And Desmond Tutu said, my mom acknowledged him and held my hand, and we held our space on the sidewalk and walked by. And he said, and I asked my mom, I said, Mom, what kind of man is that? And she said, son, he's an Anglican priest. He's a man of God. He sees us as who we really are, that we're all equals. We're all children of God. And he said, I remember stopping that day and said, Mama, I'm going to be an Anglican priest. I'm going to be a man of God. And he grew up that at 9 years old, you never know the impact that you're having. Richard, would you give me the song? So to realize, to know that I'm always being influenced, what am I consciously choosing? Am I opening my heart? Am I opening my mind? Am I seeking first the kingdom of God? Am I willing to let go of all I've been told, of let go of all that I think I know in order to become completely present? Am I willing to examine myself and say, what kind of influence am I being right now? And how could I turn it up to be even a greater influence? The final point then, the 7 seconds. 7 seconds. I once heard Caroline Mace, a great teacher and healer, describe that on average, when we give a response or we say these little bywords, on average it takes 7 seconds. That many of us have been shaped by 7 seconds of speech. For example, any of you singing as a child and someone said, honey, maybe you don't sing out loud, just move your lips. 7 seconds. Any of you ever wanted to play that ball and they said, you know, you're not so good at that? 7 seconds. I have a minister colleague, Reverend David Alt, who talked about one of those 7-second minutes that when he was 9 years old, his father had been sick and his father passed away, and he just vividly remembers the night that the phone rang and his mom answered the phone in the night. He went to the door to hear because they were expecting his father to pass. And he could tell by the conversation and his mother's crying that his father was gone. But then the next phone call that his mother made was to some relative. And what he heard was this, when his mom said, what in the world am I supposed to do with a 7-year-old boy? And you can understand in her grief and what she was meaning, but what he walked away with was feeling like, I am a burden. And how that 7 seconds made such an impact on him. I have another minister friend, Reverend Kevin Ross, who grew up under the leadership of a great Unity New Thought minister. And as a little boy, every Sunday the children there would be blessed. And they were taught to say, I am a unique, unrepeatable miracle of God. And so Kevin tells about being in the first grade when the first grade teacher said, would you everyone stand up and tell your name and say one thing about you? And he said, I am Kevin Cottrell Ross, and I am a unique, unrepeatable miracle of God. And the teacher said, this is going to be an interesting year. little Kevin Ross. But those 7 seconds, 7 seconds, we never really know what it is that may reach us. Rumi said it beautifully when the poet Rumi said, be a lamp or a lifeboat or a ladder. Help someone's soul heal. Walk out of your house like a shepherd. What if we really took seriously our ability to be an influence, and what a joy it was to be a lamp and shine your light, to be a lifeboat. You know, a lifeboat holds and carries things. To be a ladder lifts up. To be these things, to really know that we're called to do these things. And so the 7-second rule, Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. Within that space lies growth. This week I want to challenge us, between stimulus, between whatever happens and response, there is a space. We're going to call that space 7 seconds. What if we took 7 seconds to decide, and whatever I do next, will it be a tipping point for good, or will it be a tipping point for not so good? How many of you are willing to try that on for 7 seconds? To continually think about it this week, whatever I'm getting ready to set into motion, whatever I'm getting ready to do, will it be a tipping point for good or a tipping point for not so good? You are an influence, and our world needs you. Our world needs to know that it doesn't matter, the particular flavor of spirituality or religion or lack thereof. What matters is what's inside, and that you're a good creation. You are a child of the one, the all that is. And are we willing to let that influence be what shows up? I want to invite us into a time of meditative prayer, and to do so, to use this song. This song talks about that our hands, we sang this on our 70th anniversary, and it's a very powerful song that reminds us that what we do with our hands, we do with our heart, we do with our entire being. So I invite you to join me. These hands. These hands can build a road, heal a heart, or move mountains. These hands can change the world, for these are the hands of God. You sound beautiful. Sing it out. These hands can build a road, heal a heart, or move mountains. These hands can change the world, for these are the hands of God. I invite you to close your eyes, and if you're willing, to just put your hands face up in your lap. These hands represent your capacity to take action, to be engaged, to be involved. These hands can be healing hands. These hands can build up, or these hands can tear down. And these hands are simply reminders that it is this heart, the spirit within us, that calls us to be a healing presence, the light of the world, that calls us to know our truth, that you are the likeness and image of the Creator, that God looked upon this creation and said, it is good. And that each and every one are waking up in the awareness of the truth of our being. I am that I am. And so we call upon this Holy Spirit, higher nature, Christ within, Atman, whatever you choose to label it. It is simply a label. But there is a presence, an idea, the perfect pattern of your being that would express itself through you, that would be a presence of healing, that would be a voice of harmony, that would speak truth in a compassionate way, that would go out of its way to pay respect to another. We call upon this within each and every one of us. Help us to know and to be mindful of our capacity to be an influence, to know that we already are. And as we choose to let the Spirit influence us, to let the Holy Spirit speak to us, to continually be open to greater ways of knowing and being, what begins to happen is what Jesus realized: we become the way. The Native Americans say we become the hollow bone. Other traditions say that we become the sacred chalice. We become the way. These ideas, the spirit of goodness, of peace, of hope. We begin to bring it forth through our interactions, our thoughts. Every encounter becomes a holy encounter. We give thanks for those who have been a presence and a positive influence in our life. We're willing to forgive and willing to forgive, to let go, to walk away from those places that have not been a positive influence. And we use those to remind us that our actions always have an impact. And let us be a beautiful, powerful presence. Let us be the way. And for that sacred opportunity to be blessed and to be a blessing, we are so grateful. It is in and through this space of recognition that we bring into our awareness those that we are holding in prayer. If there's an individual, a family, a situation, I invite you to speak it into this space. As we speak those names and places into this space, we see the influence, the great I Am influencing through every individual, through every situation. We see the truth. We speak our own name into the sacred space. And again, we commit this week 7 seconds. That space between the stimulus and the reaction is where I have the ability to respond, responsibility. Let me always add and lead in a way that creates more of a tipping point for good. For these hands can build a road, heal a heart, and move mountains. These hands can change the world, for these are the hands of God. I invite you to gently open your eyes, to stand. These hands can build a road, heal a heart, or move mountains. These hands can change the world, for these are the hands of God. And if you're willing, take the hand beside you. Because you know when we join together, it becomes multiplied. Here we go. These hands can build a road, heal a heart, or move mountains. These hands can change the world, for these are the hands of God. beautiful. Turn it up. These hands can build a road, heal a heart, or move mountains. These hands can change the world, for these are the hands of God. Now take them back. These are the hands of God. So would you turn to one person and say, I'm glad you're under the influence, and I'm glad you're a positive influence. And a positive influence.
You all may be seated. I always feel a little better on Sunday morning knowing that this many people are going out into the world under this influence. So thank you, Reverend Darlene, for being an influencer on each of us. So, thanks. And thank you to these musicians who influence us. I don't know about you, but these songs weave through my mind all week. This is the time in our service where we make our offerings. And so think about the ways that the money that flows through your life is an influence. It also can be a tipping point. Where are you putting your money? Not just how much are you giving here, but where are you putting your money in your life? Where are you putting your resources? Where are you putting your time and your energy? So just take a moment and breathe that in. How are your resources influencing your world? And so as we breathe that in together, let's say this affirmation. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, all that I receive, and all that I am. I am now in perfect balance and flow with the universal tides of giving and receiving. Thank you, God, and so it is.
Can I be your voice? Can I be your vessel? Can I be your instrument of peace on earth? Can I be your hands? Can I be your blessing to the world? We can make heaven on earth today. Here we go. Can I be your voice? Can I be your vessel? Yeah. Can I be your instrument of peace on earth? Can I be your hands? Can I be your blessing to the world? Or we can make heaven on earth today. We can make heaven. We can make heaven. Heaven on earth today. Or we can make heaven. Make heaven on earth today. be your blessing? Can I be your instrument of peace on earth? Give me some drums. Can I be your heart? Can I be your blessing? Can I be an instrument on earth today? Everybody now. We can make heaven. We can make heaven. We can make heaven on earth today. Oh, we can make heaven. We can make heaven. We can make heaven on earth today. That last line. We can make heaven on earth today.
And so it is, heaven on earth. Let me invite the ushers to come forward, and with them, Diane, one of our prayer chaplains, is bringing the prayer box, which sits in the back of our chapel and is always available for you to put prayers in. They'll be held in confidence by our prayer chaplain team. And also, there are also always prayer chaplains available after every service to pray with you in whatever way you'd like to be prayed with today. And Reverend Elan reminds us that we can go out to the kiosk and find out ways that we can be of sacred service to this community. Let's bless all of these ways that we give and receive.
In gratitude, we bless the resources that flow through our lives and through our Unity Center, the gift of prayer and our sacred connection, our capacity to serve and make a difference with our lives, and together we affirm the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God enables us, the presence of God abides with us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.
Wherever we are, God is, and the attributes of God are such as peace. So let's stand and sing ourselves out into the world, into the peace that we want to be.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, a peace that was meant to be with God as creator. Brothers and sisters are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me at the speed of moment now. With every breath I take, let this be my joyous vow, to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Can I be your voice? Can I be your voice? Can I be your vessel? Can I be your instrument of peace on earth? Can I be your hand? Can I be your blessing to the world? We can make heaven on earth today. Can I be your voice? Can I be your vessel? Can I be your instrument of peace today? Oh, can I be your hand? Can I be your blessing to the world? We can make heaven on earth today. We can make heaven
heaven.